Way before an American author, actress, and advocate, Helen Keller, said this quote, "I think the degree of a nation's civilization may be measured by the degree of enlightenment of its women." There were two Latter-day Saint pioneer women who showed us what it looked like to be enlightened, and they paved the way for Latter-day Saint women to pursue and to continue on the path of enlightenment. I can't wait for you to find out who they are. Welcome to the 6th episode of Unnamed Women of the Doctrine and Covenants. This is a special bonus series from the Sunday on Monday podcast. Now, if you're wondering, well, what's Sunday on Monday? Well, it's a Deseret Bookshelf Plus podcast brought to you by LDS Living, where we take the Come Follow Me lesson for the week and we really dig into the scriptures together. If you want to know more about this podcast, click on the link in the description or go to ldsliving.com/Sunday on Monday for a free 7-day trial of Deseret Bookshelf Plus. Now, my favorite thing about the Sunday on Monday podcast and this special bonus series is each week I get to invite two friends to join me, and we're going to discuss the scriptures together and the real life application, and it's so much fun. So for this bonus series, I am thrilled to introduce you to my co-host this year, Jenny Reeder. Hello, actually, Dr. Jenny Reeder. How you doing, sis?
I'm so good, and I'm so glad you said doctor, because sometimes I forget.
Oh, I don't, lest you think. I do not. In fact, anyone who's earned that title, I'm going to give it to him. So we're going to give it to our next guest, because how excited are we to have Dr. Janice Johnson. Hello, Janice.
Hello. Good to be with you all.
Oh, listen, we've all been friends for a long time, but Jenny and Janice have been friends even longer. How do you two know each other? This is kind of fun.
My memory is that we first met on the steps of the Kirtland Temple on a Sunday morning in May. In the year 2003 or 4.
What?
I have no specificity there. None of such specificity, but I think that Jenny's right, because, and we can say this because it was a meeting of the Mormon History Association, and it was in Kirtland that year. And I think that it was just before this remarkable devotional,
yes. Or after,
in the Kirtland Temple.
It could have been after. I don't know,
but
it was like magical. Like, I will never forget that day.
Yeah,
I will never ever forget it.
The choir singing hymns of the Restoration and this devotional meeting in a packed Kirtland Temple, and it was, I mean, I know that I'm sure it doesn't compare with the original thing, but it was a pretty remarkable morning.
It was.
And Jenny and I met either before or after, somewhere right around there.
Wow. Well, and these two are church historians. These women know their stuff. They are authors. Jenny and Janice wrote the book Witness of Women. Highly recommend. Jenny also is part author of At the Pulpit. So these two, when I thought, okay, we're going to talk about two very important women in church history, it's a no-brainer. We knew Jenny would be here, but Jenny and I were like, and I even texted her, do you think Janice would do it? And you were at Janice's house the day I asked, which was so perfect. So here we are. And before we tell you who we're going to discuss, here's what I want to ask Jenny, because Jenny put these two women together. I would never have done that. I don't know. I love how you've curated the list of women we've talked about. So first and foremost, Jenny, tell us why you put these two women together and tell us who we're studying.
These are two women. One is a little bit older than the other, and they were both very active in the early church, and they both came to Utah. They were both married to Joseph Smith, and then they were both married for time to Brigham Young. One of them had an immediate testimony of the Book of Mormon, and the other one took her like 4 years to figure it out. And because of that, they complement each other in the most incredible ways. And Susa Young Gates called one of them the head of women, or the Relief Society, and the other was the heart of Relief Society.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah. So today we're talking about Eliza R. Snow and Zina Young.
Which one was the head and which one was the heart?
Eliza was the head and Zina was the heart.
Okay. Oh, how sweet. I didn't know that. All right. So Jenny, hit it. She's going to start us off by telling us about Eliza R. Snow. And I just have to say, how much do I love that her middle name, the R, stands for Roxy.
Isn't
Eliza Roxy Snow. So tell us about her, and then Janice is going to tell us about Zina.
Okay. Eliza was born on January 22nd, 1804, in Beckett, Massachusetts. And Janice has been too, to the house where she was born,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
It was really cool. We got to go with Laurel Thatcher Ulrich, and we went down in the basement, and she told us which part of it was original. And
Mm.
anyway, at the age of 2, her family moved to Manaway, Ohio. And that was a place that at that time was the frontier. It was the great American frontier. And she had an older sister at the time, and they later had other children. And she has a younger brother who was Lorenzo Snow. So that's how she's related to one of the prophets. She
Cool.
grew up, she was very smart, and she loved writing poems. And sometimes she would get bored with her school homework essays, and so she would write them in rhyme. And one day, out of the blue, the teacher said, "Okay, we're going to have you read aloud your essays." And she was like, "I cannot." She was very proper. She said, "I will burst into laughter if I do that, so I can't. So can I do it tomorrow?" When she didn't have such a silly little rhymed homework assignment. And the teacher said yes. Anyway, her father, Oliver Snow, was the justice of the peace for a time and the county commissioner for Portage County. And she served as his secretary. Later, she met Joseph Smith. He came to their house. They were part of a Reformed Baptist congregation led by Sidney Rigdon. And he brought Joseph to their home, and she remembered watching him very closely because there were a lot of new religions at the time. And she thought he had an honest face. Her mother and her sister immediately joined the church, but she took a good long time to study it out. She wanted to make sure it wasn't, in her words, a flash in the pan. Actually, the story of when she got baptized is kind of interesting because she decided she knew she was going to be baptized, and she'd heard that the missionaries were going to have a meeting in her area. And so beforehand, how old was she? She was probably in her 30s. She got permission from her father, as was proper. And then she went to the meeting and she waited for them to ask who wants to be baptized. And they didn't. And she was mortified because she wanted to be baptized, but she didn't want to make a big deal. So finally she said, "By the way, could I get baptized?" And they baptized her.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah. After that, she moved to Kirtland. She lived with the Smiths and taught school for them. And her parents joined. They went to Missouri, and then they went to Nauvoo, and her parents left the church. And she was married to Joseph Smith, and she was the secretary of the Relief Society. And after Joseph was killed, she married Brigham Young. They went to winter quarters, left Nauvoo, went to winter quarters, and she came to the Salt Lake Valley in 1848. Lived in the log row and then moved into the Lion House and was sick for quite a bit, probably from consumption in winter quarters. She led the work in the endowment house, the work for women in the endowment house. And then when Brigham Young wanted to reestablish relief societies in the 1860s, he asked her to assist the bishops because many of them by that time had not been familiar with the Nauvoo Relief Society. So, and she was happy to do that. And then later he asked her if she would instruct the sisters, and that scared her to death. Public speaking was scary. And she said, "My heart went pit-a-pat." She's very expressive in her words. But she took up the assignment, and later she and Zina would travel all over organizing relief societies, and then years later, young women's associations and the primary association.
Oh, wow.
And she was a great lady.
Those two, Zina and Eliza, were busy women.
Yeah.
Okay, before we get to Zina, though, I have a question for you, Jenny.
Okay.
So, Jenny, what I know about her is I would say you've spent a good chunk of your career studying and writing about Eliza. Like, she's your woman.
She is one of my women.
She's one of your, that's true. I do love how you say there's so many women on your
Yeah.
side. But I think Eliza on the other side is just championing your cause because you've spent so much time writing about her and trying to get everything you can find out about her. Tell me, in all the time you've been studying and everything you know about Eliza, tell me something that you love about her. What's one of your favorite things?
She wrote a lot of poetry, and I helped Jill Durr and Karen Davidson put together all of those poems in a book. I did a lot of research on those, and it was fun to get little snapshots of time and people and place in those. But I think more recently, I've been working on her discourses, and I led a team that gathered nearly 1,300 discourses,
Hmm.
and she spoke all over the place. And we have a book coming out with Deseret Book called Rise Up and Speak. And
Oh,
I think
wow.
this leads me to one of my favorite things. She, like I said earlier, she was scared to death to speak publicly. But the more that she did it, the more comfortable she became, and she became known as a great speaker. There are women in southern Utah who called her the queen and presidentess of all women of the
Oh,
human race.
neat. Oh,
And
wow.
but the thing is, she also encouraged other people, other women to speak, and she encouraged them in their assignments with young women and with retrenchment and with primary. She would call on young women, and one time one of them said, "I don't have anything to say," and she said, "Well, never mind, but next time you better have something to say." So she saw the value of speaking, of women speaking publicly, and she wanted them to rise up to their privileges and to their role as partners with men in building the kingdom.
Oh, my goodness. Talk about an enlightened woman for her
Hmm.
time. That's
Yes.
powerful. I'll tell you one of the favorite things I learned about her from the book, The First 50 Years. I
Hmm.
didn't know this, but she served a mission in Palestine for the rededication of the land for the Jews. Hip, hip,
Yeah. So
hooray for her.
Brigham Young called a lot of people on missions,
Hmm.
and this was not a proselytizing mission.
No.
She was called along with George A. Smith and Lorenzo Snow and a bunch of other people to go on the Grand Tour, which was the thing they called it in the 19th century America, to go to Europe and to Palestine. It was an amazing thing for her. The women helped pay for her trip, and she would write home letters to the women's exponent. Each of the people on the trip had a different periodical that they were assigned to write home to.
Hmm.
So her letters and poems from that time are incredible. And she brought home little samples of pressed flowers and seashells and fig leaves
Hmm.
to use as a pattern for the temple aprons. But it really changed her understanding of the world and of seeing Latter-day Saint women's place in the world and the role of
Oh,
Jesus Christ in Gethsemane and on the cross.
mhm. Neat. Oh my goodness.
And there is a fabulous picture of Eliza that was taken
Hmm.
when she was in Egypt, I think, right?
Yeah. Yep.
There he is. Where can I see that?
There's one on the Church Historians Press website where we have
Okay.
all of those discourses. There's a picture of her.
Oh, I've got to find that then. I'll check
Yeah,
that
and if
out.
you look at the back, it tells you what studio they were at in Cairo. And
Hmm.
there are other people that were on that trip have very similar pictures. In this, it looks very jungly.
Oh, cool. Okay, I can't wait. Oh my goodness. Okay, so that's our first enlightened woman. Janice, tell us about the second one, or the heart of the Relief Society, Zina D.H. Young, which actually her name is longer, I learned. She has she has a very long name. So tell us about her.
So Zina, we're going to start. She starts out as just Zina Diantha Huntington,
Yep.
and she's born in 1821. Now, I love Zina, but I don't have the benefit of being able to have studied Zina for the last several years, like Jenny has had with with Eliza. But I've learned to love her. So she's younger than Eliza is, though on paper their lives really do look very similar.
Hmm. And even their
Yeah.
pictures, they look alike. I mean, they look like they're the same age, kind of.
Yeah,
Wow.
and they, I mean, and a lot of 19th century pictures look very similar, but if you compare their pictures today, they would just look very similar to us. They have kind of similar hair and similar dress. Zina maybe has a gray dress or a blue dress, a little more color. Eliza was partial to black, but they also really individually, the idea that Zina is the heart and Eliza is the head. And we see that very early. Zina was away at school. Her family lived in upstate New York when they first met the Latter-day Saints. She had come home from school and she says she saw a Book of Mormon for the first time in the windowsill of her family home. And before she even touches it, before she even has opened and read it, she had this really strong spiritual experience where she knew the book was true.
Mm.
And she picks it up and she holds it to her breast and she, and very dramatically exclaims, this is true. And I think that it's a fascinating juxtaposition with Eliza because Eliza is much more methodical about it. Her mom and her sister have joined the church, so you would think it would be logical for her to join, but she's worried about it. And she's worried that it might be that Joseph Smith is just a little too charismatic, that maybe it's a flash in the pan. But when Eliza is, converted, she talks about her heart being fixed, and that's going to stick. And then if we compare that with Zina, her experience is very different. And I am sure that it's going to take more than this one moment of her with the Book of Mormon, but she also becomes fixed in her testimony of the Restoration and her testimony of the Book of Mormon. We don't have as much for Zina as we do for Eliza. Eliza wrote her entire life and spoke so much that we have more limited records when it comes to Zina. But she is a woman who does a lot of different things. She takes an obstetrics class and then directs an obstetrics class. She is very invested in the Deseret Hospital and women's involvement and the Relief Society involvement in the Deseret Hospital. So she's not there at the first meeting of the Relief Society in Nauvoo, but she's there at the second meeting. That's the first time. And then she is in. She is all in. To the Relief Society. She will be appointed treasurer when they restart the Relief Society in Utah. She is involved. She's the president of the Deseret Silk Association. So think about this variety of things. She's interested in medical stuff, the silk. So I don't know what people know about the Deseret Silk Association.
Tell us about it.
So part of Brigham Young wanting the saints to stand independent was if they were going to have silk, they didn't want to have to get it from other people. And so they start cultivating silkworms in Utah. Now, I have a little experience with silkworms because growing up in California, this was something that you did as a fourth grader. Was everybody had silkworms and you got to kind of tend to them for a little while as an experiment. And the house that I grew up in the Bay Area, we had mulberry trees in the back, and silkworms love mulberry leaves. Okay. And so I have a little experience with them. Yeah, they were a little gaggy. They were a little gross. Yes. But she becomes involved in this. She's the president of the association.
Wow.
So calling-wise, she becomes a counselor to Eliza in the Relief Society presidency once we're in Utah. She's also involved in suffrage, the National Council of Women. And there are a lot of things that we could talk about with Zina, but her family life is really interesting. She, like Eliza, is a plural wife of Joseph Smith, but she first marries Henry Jacobs, and she's courting Henry Jacobs when Joseph proposes to her, says, basically, Joseph doesn't kind of when he suggests that someone enter into plural marriage, it's not a romantic proposal. It's kind of, God has revealed this to me. You decide if this is God's will. And she was already courting Henry Jacobs, and she said, no, I'm good, thank you. And then later, Henry leaves on a mission, and she begins to get concerned that she chose the wrong thing.
Oh, wow.
And I think that Zina's example actually teaches us a lot about just the wide variety. It is very difficult for us to talk about plural marriage in kind of singular, say it always works this way. This is one example of polyandry, of a woman being sealed or married to more than one husband.
Yeah.
And her life, she lives with Brigham Young, and she's sealed with him for time.
Now, tell me what that means. Because that's interesting that they're only sealed, that they're married just for time because they're already sealed to someone else. So what does that mean to be only married for time? What are the responsibilities?
She lived in the Lion House with other of Brigham's wives. They had a daughter together. But eternally she's still sealed to Joseph.
Oh, wow. Was she ever sealed to Henry later on? Did anybody ever do that work?
She's not sealed to Henry, but interestingly, after Brigham Young dies, she moves across the street from Henry and takes care of Henry for the rest of his life.
Whoa.
So this is messy,
Yeah.
This is super messy.
Janice, do you know about the letter that Henry wrote to her when he was sent on his mission by Brigham Young?
Yeah. Do you want to bring that in?
Yeah. So this is also in the Church History Topics essays about Zina. He still loves Zina, and he feels like he should marry another woman on his mission, which is not given. He's not given permission to do that. So he gets in more trouble. But he writes her this beautiful letter that I love and I quote all the time. He says, "There will be twistings and turnings in this life, but in the next life, everything will be worked out."
I like that quote. That's a good way to put a polygamy, twistings and turnings.
Yeah.
That's a kind way.
And Zina feels those twistings and turnings. And
yeah.
I kind of wonder if all of those twistings and turnings in her own personal life enable her to be more empathetic and to reach out for people. That's why she's known as the Heart, is because she's so focused on taking care of people and helping people and really caring for people. And I think that's a really beautiful example.
I think you're right, Janice. That's some great insight into Zina and her ability to be the heart of the Relief Society, because it would have been tricky.
I've been reading the biography of Joseph Fielding Smith. And when he's on his mission in England, his wife, Levira Smith, was really sick. And Zina went over and started caring for her and nursing her and staying with her because she was not in a good place. And she wrote to Joseph Fielding and said, I think you need to, she gave him some suggestions of ways to improve their relationship. And it's just really sweet because she really cares. She really cares about both of them, and she wants to help both of them.
Did Zina and Eliza ever live together in the house of Brigham Young? In the Lion House?
Yes, they lived together in the Lion House. Not in the same room. They each had their own rooms. But yeah, in the Lion House on the second floor.
Okay, so tell me a little bit then about this idea, because before we started, we did talk about getting into polygamy, and I'd just love to get your thoughts on it. This relationship, because they were sealed to Joseph, then they were married for time to Brigham Young. But then I go back to the women, then I think, who am I to dismiss the revelation these women received? What kind of woman would I be to look back on history and go, well, it was a sham and they were stupid or they were fooled or they were bamboozled? I have to trust that they received a revelation for them to enter into this relationship. And then it kind of separates it for me. And I think, what kind of woman would I be to not trust their revelation? So any thoughts you have on this connection between these women and polygamy, or just thoughts in general?
I think that it's interesting because by the time we get to Brigham Young, by the time we get to Utah, it's a very different thing than it was in Nauvoo. In Nauvoo, it's not like the revelation comes down and Joseph knows, okay, this is exactly how you're supposed to implement it.
Mhm.
It is, they're trying to figure things out, and we see Zina trying to figure it out herself. Both of them are there at the early stage when they're trying to figure it out. And there are also two who are able to live with some of the benefits of it, which I think is sometimes hard for us to see in the 19th century. Eliza can go off and give sermons all over the Utah Territory, all over the West, because she has support from Brigham and from, I would also say, probably the other wives are also giving her some of that support. But it becomes a different thing in Utah. I think it's really interesting. So Zina learns about Relief Society. She's tutored by Eliza, and she travels over thousands of miles with Eliza. But they still have their own ministry. They still do things in their own way. And she is just a beautiful example of kind of doing what the Lord asks her to do. And I think some of this, like it seems like her taking the class in obstetrics, that's something that's really interesting to her. So her involvement in Deseret Hospital, that's something interesting to her. But the Silk Society, a Silk Association is not something that's instantly, automatically interesting to her. But she wants to do what the Lord asks her to do, whatever it is.
That might be the best example of saying yes to any calling right there.
No,
if I ever
seriously.
complain about a calling, I will think of her having to deal with silkworms.
Yeah. When she, so I think it's the first meeting that she presides over the Relief Society after Eliza's death, when becomes the General Relief Society president. She says, "Sisters, let us be as one grand phalanx and stand for the right. Let us be humble and firm, honor truth, and be valiant in sustaining it." She's involved in the temple. She's involved in so many different things. She's going to be matron in the Salt Lake Temple. She's there. She serves both in Salt Lake and St. George and Logan before Salt Lake are done. But she is really dedicated, even when the manifesto and the end of plural marriage is announced. This is a woman who has now been in plural marriage as long as it has existed, and she has supported it, and she has defended. She has defended that the church brings all this good into her life, and she says, "We look to God, and we know God will figure it all out."
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful example of both the happy things and the more difficult things. She doesn't know what this is going to look like, but she is committed to look to God first.
What a beautiful thing. Look to God first and it'll all get figured out. Isn't that sort of the answer for everything in our lives right now? Like, just look to God, it'll all get figured out. That's a beautiful ending to a remarkable life of Zina. Zina Diantha Huntington Jacobs Young. That's a mouthful.
All the names.
All
Many
the
names.
names. That is so awesome. Wow. Well, thank you, Janice, for sharing that about Zina and for doing your research on her. She's a remarkable woman, and I can see why these two women needed to be together. And so to wrap all this up then, as church historians, I want both of you to tell me then, why does it matter to study women's history?
I love that quote that you started us out with by Helen Keller, and it reminds me of something that she used to be a BYU professor, Valerie Hudson Kassler, who is now in Texas. She did a lot of work on third world countries and women in third world countries. And she said the success of a country depends on the well-being of its women. And I really think that can be applied to the church, but also specifically to Eliza and Zina. I think that they understood women's role as seen by and taught by Joseph Smith as partners to the men and as co-workers. Eliza uses that phrase quite a bit in her discourses. And I love the fact that they had different gifts and different talents and different testimonies. Oftentimes they would travel around and speak in tongues. One of them would speak and the other would interpret, or they would give each other blessings. And they were aware of who they were as women and who they were as women in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They understood their place and their role, and they supported each other, not only the two of them, but other women. And it's beautiful to see that.
Oh, it is beautiful. Thank you, Jenny. What about you, Janice? Why do the stories of women matter?
Well, I think that, I don't know, if we look at like Zina's, the preaching that we do get from Zina, she's talking on she has lots of different interests, and she's not, we think of a 19th century woman and we tend to make maybe some assumptions because they all look pretty dour in their photographs because they have to sit still for so long. But she's encouraging women to do so many different things and to really fulfill the measure of their creation. And she is someone who taught by example how to take care of people, how to, from her obituary, we have a couple quotes that she was cheerful when only brave souls could smile, that someone remembered her as an angel of hope and faith to thousands and thousands of Latter-day Saints. Like, sometimes those become trite when we don't know the person, but both Eliza and Zina are women who had a ministry, and their ministry looked different. How they fulfilled it looked different, but they had a mission and a ministry to fulfill in mortality. And they did that in really beautiful and remarkable ways, especially considering everything that's going on at the time and those things that they are living through.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and these two women, Zina and Eliza, I love learning about them. And what you have taught me today is just how, going back to the quote, they were so enlightened for their time. And I'm amazed at the amount of work that they were able to accomplish, and the work they did benefits us as women in the church today. We would be remiss not to study their lives and to really dig in deep to all of these women this year, because as we've said throughout this whole year, there would be no church history if it weren't for women, also in addition to men. Like, it wasn't just a male thing. It required the help of women as well. And so I think we saw that today. And I will never forget Zina being afraid of those silkworms. Gross.
We'd all be, they're,
no, thank you. So thank you, Janice and Jenny. I appreciate you guys giving your time today to talk about these women.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Well, thank you to those of you who are listening, and thank you for joining us for the 6th episode of Unnamed Women of the Doctrine and Covenants. Unnamed Women of the Doctrine and Covenants is a special bonus series from the Sunday on Monday podcast, and you can find it wherever you get podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and more on the LDS Living podcast feed. So go follow us for many more women this year. The Sunday on Monday study group is a Deseret Bookshelf Plus original brought to you by LDS Living. It's written and hosted by me, Tammy Uzelak Hall, and today our beautiful study group participants were Janice Johnson and Jenny Reeder. I should say Dr. Janice Johnson and Dr. Jenny Reeder. Our podcast is produced by Koa Singer and me. It is edited and mixed by Koa Singer, and our executive producer is Aaron Hallstrom. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time, and please remember, you are God's favorite.